everyone, and welcome back to the World of Ravean kind of world building videos. This time we're going to discuss the role of magic in the place that it has within the world of Ravean. Magic within the world of Ravean is both a rare occurrence to some extent and ingrained in many of the cultures of many individual nations. It makes it a little bit more of a oxymoron, but basically magic is ingrained in just about every culture on the surface of Ravean. Right? It is, however, not accessible to every single person. Not commonly, right? So you might have the case where, like, my players right now are in the city of Moonshade. Moonshade happens to be the magical capital of study and refinement for the Revant Empire. So magic is going to be quite a bit more common there. But as you travel away from that and away from major cities, it is not going to be necessarily as common, with plenty of the other common folk doing things by hand and with little understanding of magic otherwise. The majority of the world's population of everyday folk live typically mundane lives in terms of magic. The commonalities of magic is limited to upper class and government officials. It's just kind of the way things are. It's a resource. Right? So everyday people know, however, that their magic exists, and they can typically recognize the casting of magical spells or chalk things up to magic should some effect present. They aren't completely stupid, and they understand that magic exists, but they do not necessarily recognize a specific spell versus another. So you run into an issue where you could be casting something rather innocuous, like create food and water, or something else. And there's a potential that it could be misconstrued as something else should another effect occur. Right? It becomes a little bit stickier with that, because being untrained in the magical arts, they can't identify one spell from another, or even one magical effect from another. So you can cast a simple cantrip like Prestidigitation, and potentially a lightning strike happens and lights a field on fire. And they're like, well, was that you? And they won't necessarily know, and they can't quite tell. With much of the political elite and more affluent people of the world being connected to higher level and higher tier stakes, goals, and efforts, in some capacity, they will have more awareness or potentially have studied magic in their own capacity. It's important to know these kinds of things as you move up in those tiers. Some more than others may prove to be more magically adept, with a level of education or experience varying between each individual. Understanding magic. In general, for kind of D&D lore, magic, especially for the world of Ravean, comes from the alteration of the weave. The weave is not an original Ravean creation either. This has just been a thing. The world and all that exists within a field of energy that permeates and overlays everything. Spells and other magical effects occur when the weave is altered. The various threads that provide this power that exists within this energy field get altered to rewrite the rules of a localized area or a field for an area of effect. In the short, the weave is kind of simultaneously around and makes up everything. The balance of the weave in its natural state of the world as we know it is kind of just a normal equivalent to like a flat canvas or a flowing bit of cloth. It's when you start to tug at those strings that you make changes. So, as the weave is altered, different effects are produced. Some beings that alter the weave do so with purpose and design, like wizards, whereas there are some that alter the weave merely by existing, like dragons and other kind of magical creatures. When a dragon establishes its lair, for example, the region around the lair is slowly permeated with this magical essence, and the power of the dragon itself alters the landscape into the same kind of energy. White dragon may create a perpetual, unending blizzard around the area around its lair, because the area becomes suffused with its particular magic. Now, spellcasting, therefore, is a rapid, often temporary alteration of the weave when looked at it on that scale. When you look at it in terms of like a dragon's lair, it is a fairly long-term, relatively permanent, almost geological time hundreds of years, thousands of years kinds of thing. Spellcasting that takes, even 24 hours is basically a blink of an eye when looked at on that scale. So spellcasting is temporary most of the time, and it alters the weave to produce some sort of a magical effect based on whatever the spell you're casting is. Magical practitioners are capable of permanently altering the weave in some cases, or returning the weave to its neutral state with powerful magic. But the weave itself will always exist, and it cannot be created or destroyed. So, you can take a spell like Hallow and hallow an area or a creature or something else, and provide a permanent alteration of the weave based on that spell. You can then, later on, come by and use another very powerful spell to be able to dispel that magic by returning the weave to its natural state. The easiest way that I can describe this is kind of the cloth analogy. Picture that you have a tapestry, and the tapestry makes up the entirety of the world as you know it. When you pull the strings into different positions, you can create different pictures on that tapestry. It's the minute that somebody comes by and pulls those strings back into their normal position that your spell ends. And sometimes the weave wants to pull itself back into position, which is when you have a very quick, rapid effect, like a firebolt or another temporary spell that slowly those threads creep back into their normal place. So, let's look at the magic across territories. Various territories have been influenced by the raw power of the planes. Typically, these planes are the inner planes, such as the elemental planes or the Shadowfell or even the Feywild. But these parts of the world have had the weave of their location altered permanently through prolonged exposure to this kind of planar power. It's something that'll be important through the campaign so far, but there are places of significant power within the world of Ravean, because there are places here that don't necessarily always make sense. Like, why is the middle of the Ramont Empire warm and almost a tropical savanna when it is surrounded by a frozen, almost Arctic tundra, and then a very cold kind of a pine forest type area that's kind of temperate in nature, and it does have some seasonal variation where it gets warm, but then it has some very harsh winters. And why so does this southern region also have that same kind of effect when it's further south than some of the regions that are warm and very easily described as savanna territories? So those are kinds of things that the place has been altered by planar magic to some degree and for some reason. And so a curious player that wants to know more could kind of investigate that on a higher scale. But we'll see kind of what people figure out. So we'll discuss kind of the regulation of magic for Ravean. Magic is an extremely powerful resource. With the power of magic being well known, a number of self-appointed regulatory offices have been developed to maintain the peace and prevent the gross misuse of magical arts. One of these is the Order of the Tempered Arcanists. The Order of the Tempered Arcanists is an international order of mages and arcanists that have a watchful eye. They keep a watchful eye on the governments of the world, working with trusted officials within each government to address the practice of dangerous magic. These members of this Order of the Tempered Arcanists serve across the entirety of Ravean, with the majority of its members being from nations like the Ramont Empire, the Mistkeep Mining Guild, and the Serac Wastes. These three nations, serving as sort of an international alliance of mages, are a sort of world power in their own right. The Order of the Tempered Arcanists has numerous members, but the highest ranking arcanists of this relatively exclusive organization are known as the Forged. While much of the Forged members come from the Ramont Empire and the Mistkeep, in recent years after the ascension of the new Sultan, the Serac Waste has been benefiting from membership into this higher tier. Basically, very, very powerful magical practitioners from the Ramont Empire and the Mistkeep have always been working together, and the Sirak Waste has joined in recent years after the death of the old Sultan and the rise of the new Sultan. And then the new Sultan has made it possible for people to grow and become powerful arcanists in their own right within their territory that it can then offer as members to this exclusive organization called the Forged. That's within that same order. Otherwise, there is also the Order of the Ebony Tower. And the Order of the Ebony Tower is a magical authority within the Lebat Empire itself, made up of the hands of the various approved gods and goddesses by the national government. The Order of the Ebony Tower serves as a magical authority in charge of limiting the practice of magic to the more divine arts. We'll discuss it a little bit more in the future, but the Lebat Empire is kind of a theocracy. They're extremely faith-based, so they do not believe in arcane magic versus divine magic. And magic is kind of based off of where you get it from. Arcane magic is potentially learned or comes from another source that isn't a deity. Divine magic comes from a deity. So you have, cleric spells, potentially druid spells as well, because they come from nature and the power of nature itself. And then paladin spells as well, those kinds of things. Those are the approved magics that are allowed within the Lebat Empire. So the casting of arcane magic is prohibited by the Ebony Tower. They view magic as a gift from their three gods, with the practice of arcane magic or worship of unapproved gods as blasphemy that needs to be ended. The Order of the Ebony Tower is, in a way, an order of high clerics and paladins established with the sole goal of rooting out this blasphemy and pruning it from the rest of their population. This can mean imprisonment or even death for practitioners of the regular arcane arts. So a wizard is not welcome within the Lebat Empire. The Order of the Ebony Tower will find them. The Order of the Severed Continent. This is an interesting one because this is kind of a research one to some extent. The Order of the Severed Continent is an organization invested in the research of the rim of the world and the mapping of the various boundaries that are present around the world of Ravean. They hope to map the locations where the planes may have most influenced to create a sort of map or diagram of the world before the planes were separated. Remember back to the creation mythos. It was said, at least in theory by people so far, that the belief is at this point by the average person that the Ravean, the world of Ravean, is the prime material plane, which is actually just an Eden, a perfect place that is the perfect balance of all of the planes that surrounded it and was the heart of a supercontinent that was all of the other planes. So the Feywild and the Shadowfell and Mount Celestia and all of the other planes existed as a supercontinent according to this mythos. So the Order of the Severed Continent is trying to make a map of exactly where each plane was on this supercontinent before it broke, according to this belief system. So the Order of the Severed Continent doesn't have very many official leaders, with most prominent minds seeking to work with each other and becoming the most prominent voice in the field, that the remainder end up rallying behind. It's kind of a loose association of researchers that are doing their damnedest to find and make breakthroughs on this theory, right? And they travel across the entirety of Ravean, trying their best to disregard political boundaries to research the rim of the world. So that will be kind of the understanding of magic for the world of Ravean. Magic is complicated, and it makes it very difficult when you're world building, but also makes it very fun when you're world building. Sometimes the geographical aspect of the world isn't there because it was erosion. Sometimes it's something else, something much more powerful, and it gives you the chance to create a few different things just for fun and see where it goes from there. Otherwise, thank you all for watching the video, and remember, be good to one another, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.